Before the sun came up over a gravel lot in the mountains, a man sat behind the wheel of an old SUV and did nothing at all. He didn't lace his boots. He didn't check a map. He just watched each car that pulled in. Somewhere else, a friendly stranger explained he was helping search for a missing hiker, and then asked exactly where two tired hikers planned to sleep that night. On a quiet forest road, two friends came back to their car and found a folded note under the wiper, warning them that the road out had washed away and telling them to call a number for help. A father spotted a small camera mounted on a tree above a remote parking lot, aimed not at wildlife or the trail, but straight down at the license plates of every vehicle below. And a woman who signed a trail register with her name and her route came back to hear a man she'd never met say that name out loud. These are dramatized personal style accounts, inspired by realistic dangers hikers can encounter at trailheads, parking areas, and the roads leading into the woods. Names, parks, roads, and identifying details are fictionalized. There's a particular kind of relief that comes at a trailhead. You've made it. The car is right there. The trail is behind you, or it's laid out ahead of you in the early light, and everything feels manageable. That relief is exactly what these 5 stories are about, because the trailhead is where a certain kind of danger likes to wait, not on the trail where the terrain does the intimidating, right here at the edge, where a stranger with a vehicle looks like just another hiker, and where the moment you drop your guard is the moment someone else has been counting on. Every thread in these stories is a person. That's the point. Before we begin, take a second to like the video and subscribe to Mind After Dark. And in the comments, tell us where you're watching from and what time it is there. That small interaction helps YouTube continue recommending these stories. Now let's begin. Story 1. The man who was there before sunrise. He never once got out of the SUV. Not the whole time I could account for him, and that stretched across most of a morning. I've spent a lot of hours at trailheads before dawn, and people do all kinds of things while they wait for enough light to start. This man did nothing but sit there and watch the lot fill up one car at a time. And when I came back down hours later, he was still doing it. I'm in my 30s, and I hike alone a lot. Early starts are just part of how I do it. If I'm going to do 12 or 14 miles with real elevation, I want to be moving before sunrise so I'm off the exposed sections before the afternoon heat. That morning I was headed up a ridge trail off a Forest Service road, a place I'd been twice before. It's popular enough that I never felt like I was in the middle of nowhere. But it's the kind of lot that's dead empty at 5 in the morning and packed by 9. I pulled in around 4:45. My headlights swept across the gravel and caught one vehicle already parked, nose out, in the far corner near the trees. An older SUV. The boxy kind. Dark green or dark gray, hard to tell in the dark. There was a person in the driver's seat. I could make out the shape of his head against the faint gray of the windshield. And what caught my attention was that the interior stayed dark. No phone glow. People who show up that early are usually killing time on their phones. He was just sitting there in the black. I parked closer to the trailhead board and started my routine. Boots, gaiters, filled my 2 bottles from the jug in my trunk, checked that my downloaded map was working since there's basically no signal up there. Ordinary stuff. And while I did it, I kept half an eye on the SUV, the way you do, and what I noticed was everything he wasn't doing. He wasn't getting ready. When you're about to hike, your body language is unmistakable, even in low light. You opening but wide awake and sitting up, watching. In the growing light, I also picked out 2 things I filed away in case I needed them later. A cracked, spidered corner on the rear windshield, and a strip of something, maybe tape or a patch trim piece, running along the top of the driver's door. There are innocent reasons to sit in a car at a trailhead, waiting for a late partner, taking a work call somewhere with a shoulder to pull onto. I ran through them. But none of the ordinary explanations fit a man sitting bolt upright in the dark, dry-eyed, turning his head to follow every car. I decided I wasn't going to start the trail alone, if I could help it. So when a second party pulled in a few minutes later, just before the sky really started to gray, I waited until they'd finished parking and getting sorted. And then I wandered over, casual, like anyone would. 2 guys and a woman, around my age, big packs, clearly set up for the same kind of day I had planned. I asked if they were heading up the Ridge Trail. They were. I asked if they'd mind if I fell in with them for the first section, said I liked company on the early part while it's still dark. They were easy about it. While we were talking, one of the guys nodded toward the corner and said, "Lo, what's with that guy? He's been sitting there since we pulled in." So it wasn't only me. Before we started, all 4 of us drifted past the board, and I noticed the woman actually slow her step and glance over at the SUV, sizing it up the way you do when something's off. That quiet shared wariness made me feel less like I was inventing a threat out of a tired morning. Before we walked in, I did one more thing. Near the board, I quietly took out my phone and got a photo of the SUV, angling to catch the plate, which the last of my headlights had clipped when I pulled in, and which was readable enough. I typed a short message to a friend, said which trailhead I was at, that a guy was sitting in this SUV watching the lot without hiking, and attached the photo. It sat there with the little spinning icon, no signal. I left it queued and started up with the group. Once we were moving and talking, the man dropped out of my head. That's what a good climb does. We stayed loosely together for the first couple of miles, somewhere up around the first big switchback, where the trail broke out of the trees and gained elevation. My phone buzzed once in my hip pocket. The queued message had gone through the second I caught a sliver of signal. Small thing, but it settled something in me. Knowing the photo and the location now existed somewhere off that mountain with a timestamp on them. The group took a break at a junction, and I pushed on at my pace. Fine, uneventful day up on the ridge. Good light, the overlook to myself for a while. The usual nods with people heading down. Coming back down maybe 5 hours after I'd started, the man surfaced in my mind again, and I hoped the lot would be full and chaotic and he'd be long gone. The lot was busier. 15 vehicles maybe, where there'd been 3 at dawn. And the older SUV was still there. But not exactly where it had been. He'd repositioned it during the day, backed it out of the far corner and into a spot along the row of hiker vehicles, still nose out, but now with a clean, straight line of sight down the backs of the parked cars. From where he sat now, he could read every trunk and every plate in that row without turning his head much at all. 5 hours alone didn't prove anything. Repositioning the SUV for a clearer view of every trunk and plate was what finally ruled out the innocent explanations for me. Put it all together, the hours of never preparing to hike, the head tracking each arrival, and now this deliberate move to a spot that let him study trunks and license plates, and there was no version of it left that felt harmless. I stopped near the board, made a show of fussing with my poles, and watched him the way he'd been watching everyone else. At dawn, he'd track cars coming in. Now his attention was on the trail mouth. Hikers would emerge, and his head would follow them to whichever vehicle they went to. He was matching people to cars. I didn't want to walk to the ranger board or my own car alone with him doing that, because both would put me out in the open, back to him, near his line of sight, exactly when I'd be distracted, digging for keys. A group of 3 had just come down and were loading up a few spaces from mine, so I walked over and made conversation. How was the top? Are the wildflowers out? Then, quietly, I said there was a guy who'd been parked in that corner since before dawn, never hiking, and that I felt strange walking to my car alone. The woman glanced over and said, without prompting, that she'd noticed him too and thought it odd he'd never gotten out. Twice now, from 2 different groups. That was enough for me. We loaded up around the same time. I put my pack in, started the engine, and pulled out while they were still finishing, and asked them to wait until I was moving so I wasn't the last one near him. As I drove past, I looked. He was still facing forward, but his eyes came to my SUV and held for a second. Ordinary-looking man, maybe 50s, nothing you'd remember in a lineup. That was almost the worst part. Once I had signal on the way down, I called the ranger station. A man in an older dark SUV, cracked rear windshield, taped driver's door, parked in the lot for at least 5 hours, never hiking, watching arriving cars in the morning and repositioning to watch trunks and plates in the afternoon. I gave the plate as best I'd captured it and the description. They said they'd send someone to check. I never learned what they found. I don't know if he was casing cars to break into, watching solo hikers, or waiting for one particular person off that trail. That empty space where the answer should be is what stayed with me. I still start early. I just don't walk to my vehicle alone at the end anymore, if there's any way around it. That's the quiet danger of a trailhead. It looks like a place where everyone shares the same purpose, so a stranger sitting in a parked vehicle reads as harmless by default. We extend the benefit of the doubt because the setting seems to earn it. But a lot at the edge of the woods is also a place where a person can watch for hours and never once have to explain himself. The 2 friends in this next account learned that a stranger doesn't always sit and wait in silence. Sometimes he walks straight up to you, wearing the manner of someone there to help. Story 2. The fake search volunteer. He told us he was helping look for a missing hiker, and I believed him for about a minute and a half. Then he asked where we were staying that night, and the way he asked it flipped a switch in me. I stopped paying attention to the trail behind us or the lost man he was describing, and started paying attention to him. My friend Dana and I had done a loop that day, maybe 9 miles, nothing brutal, at a state forest a couple hours from where we both live. We're in our late 20s and we hike together a few times a year. This was a weekend where we'd rented a little cabin nearby, planning 2 trails over 2 days. We came off the trail in the late afternoon at that tired and happy stage where you're mostly thinking about dinner. The lot was thinning. Ours was one of maybe 6 vehicles left. Near the kiosk, a man was talking to another pair of hikers as we walked up. Regular looking, 40s or 50s, ball cap, a lanyard around his neck with a laminated card on it. We caught the tail end of it. One of the pair was answering him in real detail, saying they'd come in from the north entrance and pointing back toward the road, telling him they'd left their camper at a dispersed site off the second pull-off. And as they talked, The man in the cap looked down at his phone and typed something quick, then looked up and thanked them warmly. What struck me once I replayed it was that he wasn't writing down anything about the trail or the missing man. He was writing down where their vehicle was. He watched the pair walk off, watched which direction they went, and then turned to us with an easy, apologetic wave. He said a hiker had been reported overdue, an older man in his 60s, and that volunteers were covering the trailheads to talk with people coming off the trails. He held up a photo on his phone for a second. Blurry, taken at a distance, a gray-haired man in an outdoor jacket. No name under it, no date, no case number, nothing that looked like it came from any actual agency or report. The kind of picture that could match almost any older man in the woods. Would we mind answering a few questions? Had we passed anyone like that? My honest first instinct was to help. Somebody's father was out there with the light going. Dana and I both started working our memories. He nodded along, calm and competent. Then the questions drifted. Dana, staying perfectly friendly, tested him a little. She asked what time the missing man had last been seen. He said late morning, I think, which didn't square with him telling us earlier they'd had volunteers out since first light. She asked what route the man had planned. He couldn't name one. For someone supposedly coordinating a search across these trailheads, he had no idea which way the missing hiker had gone. And then his own questions started, one after another, none of them about the woods. Did we have enough fuel to get where we were going? Where were we staying tonight, and was it a cabin, and did it have exterior lights, a gate, other rentals nearby? Were we leaving early in the morning? Each one on its own could have passed. Together they drew a very specific picture of two women where they'd be sleeping, how isolated it was, how reachable, and when they'd be gone. Dana handled it beautifully. She fed him bad information on purpose. She said we were heading out first thing, real early, before 6, when in truth, we hadn't decided anything. And she said we were staying with a big group of friends, place is packed. She gave the cabin no edges, no location, no sense that it was two of us alone up a dirt road. While she did it, I noticed him glance down at the key fob in my hand, then at the lot, like he was trying to match us to a car. I pulled out my phone, said loud enough for him to hear, "Let me tell everyone we're on our way back now," typed on a dead screen and pocketed it. He eased off, said he appreciated our time, and stepped back. We walked to Dana's car. On the way in that morning, we'd passed an unmarked sedan pulled off near the lot exit, angled to face the road in a spot with a clean view of every vehicle leaving. I'd thought nothing of it then. Now, glancing over, I couldn't tell whether someone was sitting in it or not. The glare was bad, but the shape of a headrest looked wrong, too tall, like a person. Dana, without breaking stride, lifted her phone as if checking a text and took a photo of it. We didn't stop to study it. We got in, locked up, and instead of turning back the way we'd come, we took a longer route toward town, watching the mirrors. The sedan didn't pull out after us, but from where it sat, whoever was in it could have logged which way every car turned, leaving that lot. We stopped at a busy gas station on the edge of town before we did anything else. Only from there, standing in a lit lot with people around, did I call the cabin host, and I kept it vague, just said our plans had shifted and we might be out late. Nothing about being spooked or coming back at all. Then we drove to the ranger contact station near the entrance and asked whether there was a search on for an overdue hiker. The employee said not that he'd heard, and he'd have heard, When we described the man and his questions, he got serious, took it down, and made a point I hadn't fully put together. None of what that man asked, where we were sleeping, whether the cabin had a gate, how much gas we had, would help anyone locate a person lost in the forest. Those are questions about the hikers, not about the missing man. That's when it clicked how many people he'd probably worked that afternoon. The pair before us had handed him the exact location of their camper. Who knew how many others had given him a cabin, a campsite, a schedule? The cabin was 2 miles up a dirt road with no front desk, no neighbors within earshot, no reliable signal. Exactly the profile he'd been fishing for. We took a room at a chain hotel in town. Lit lot, staffed desk. It wasn't drama. It was just the obvious call once we understood what he'd actually been collecting. As we pulled out of that trailhead, I looked back one more time. He was already crossing the gravel toward the next group coming down off the trail. The same easy wave, the same tilt of the head, starting over. What makes that kind of encounter work is that it borrows the shape of something good. A search for a missing person is one of the few situations where a stranger can ask you pointed questions and expect real answers. Remove the search, and all you have left is a man collecting the outline of your evening. The two friends in this next account met a cousin of that same trick. Except this one didn't walk up and speak. He was already waiting on the windshield in a stranger's handwriting, built to make them talk themselves into a mistake. Story 3. The note under the wiper. The note said the road out had washed away and warned us not to drive down it, to call the number below for a ranger escort instead, which would have been alarming and useful if it were real. Except there was no barrier at the trailhead. No official sign. Nothing to back it up. And a man was standing beside a pickup, 40 feet off, watching to see what we'd do with it. Me and my buddy Marcus go for the routes other people skip, not because we're hardcore, we just hate crowds. So we pick the trails with the rough access roads and the small lots that keep the casual traffic away. This one was down a rutted forest road, 20 minutes at 15 miles an hour, ending in a dirt pull-off, with room for maybe 8 vehicles. 2 other cars there when we started. When we came back in the afternoon, it was just ours, and 1 pickup we didn't recognize. Good out and back, saw almost nobody. We walked up to my car talking about burgers, and there it was, a piece of paper folded under the driver's side wiper. First thought was a flyer, which made no sense out there. Marcus pulled it out and read it aloud. Block letters, blue pen, on plain-lined notebook paper. Something like, access road closed below due to washout. Do not attempt to drive out. Call this number for ranger escort. Then a phone number with a local-looking area code. Marcus turned it over. Nothing on the back. He works around permits and inspections, so he knows what official paperwork looks like, and he started ticking off what was wrong. No letterhead, no agency name, no date, no time the closure started. And here's the one that got him. The note said the access road, but never named it. He pulled up his offline map, which showed the road we'd driven in on with an actual Forest Service number on it, a specific designation. A real closure names the road, he said. It'd say the number. It'd match a gate somewhere. This just says the road, like whoever wrote it doesn't know what it's called. Those forest roads do genuinely wash out, though. A hard rain can cut a gully a mile or 2 down where you can't see it from the lot. So for a second it landed. Then the man by the pickup spoke up, leaning on the tailgate. No pack, no dog. Yeah, I got the same one. Washout's real bad about a mile down. Already called the number. They said a crew's coming to escort us out. Wouldn't try it. Marcus glanced at the pickup's windshield. No note under its wiper. And a minute later, when Marcus asked him, easy exactly where the washout was, the man said, down near the highway end, real bad there. A mile down, then near the highway, 2 different places. His truck was angled near the mouth of the lot, not blocking us, but positioned so the way out, pinched down past it. While Marcus kept him talking, I stepped to the side and quietly photographed the pickup and its plate, and a long scrape down the driver's side of the bed I could use to pick it out again. The man kept working us. Did we have anyone expecting us back? He offered, real neighborly, to hold our packs in his truck bed so we wouldn't have to carry them while we waited. He said we might as well leave our car unlocked for the road crew, make it easier for them. And the whole time his phone sat face up in his hand, like he was waiting on it. Marcus asked him, casual as anything, that number on the note, does it ring you or dispatch? The man didn't answer it, just said, it'll get you the crew, and changed the subject back to us waiting. Marcus had already scoped the exit. He'd spotted on the map and from memory a wide, flat turnaround about a quarter mile down where we could reverse if the washout was real. He said cheerful, we'll just ease down and look. Room to turn around if it's bad. The man got insistent then, really shouldn't. Dangerous, better to wait with him. He did not want us driving down to see for ourselves. We waited until he stepped back from the exit to say something else, and then got in, locked up, and eased out past the truck, swinging wide. Marcus watched the pickup in the mirror while I crept the car forward and watched the road surface. We stopped together at the turnaround, and without either of us getting far from the car, we looked. No gully, no drop shoulder, no water, no cones, no barricade, no crew, no fresh tracks, no erosion. The road was exactly as passable as that morning. I photographed the intact surface, the little brown junction marker with the road number on it, and the total absence of any official closure. The pickup showed once in the mirror, turning up in the lot like he might follow, but he never came onto the main road behind us. On pavement with a couple of bars I called the Real Ranger District. No closure, no damage reported. She explained that a genuine closure would be posted with signs and a gate at the main junction where the forest road meets the highway, not on one windshield, and never through a private cell number and a one-on-one escort. She asked us to hang on to the note and email the photos. She said they'd had at least one other report of an odd handwritten notice in that general area, but she didn't call it anything or say the two were connected. Marcus slid the note into a clean zip bag so we wouldn't handle it any more than we already had. There was nothing visibly identifying on it, just block printing, plain paper, and a private phone number, but we left any further conclusions to the district staff. He figures the whole thing was built to get someone to call that number, which would tell the guy exactly who was stuck and alone out there, or to just stay put and wait for an escort while the lot emptied and it was only them and him. Maybe it was about the vehicle if he stepped away, or the packs he offered to hold, or the phones. We'll never know which, and not knowing is what sits wrong. What I do know is the note was engineered to make a tired hiker do something that felt cautious and responsible but left them exposed, and a man was standing there to see whether it took. It didn't take on us. But on a slow day, on a road like that, I doubt we were the first windshield he tried. A piece of paper is a strange kind of weapon, but it works the way the fake volunteer worked. It hands you a story and hopes you'll finish it in the direction it wants. So far, these threats have needed a person present, watching, ready to react. The father in this next account ran into something colder and more patient. Not someone waiting in the lot at all, but something left behind in the trees to do the waiting for him. Quietly gathering information, whether anyone was there or not. Story 4. The camera hidden above the parking lot. The camera was aimed at the wrong thing, and that was the first thing I saw before I'd even shouldered my pack. A little trail camera strapped to a tree above the gravel lot, and it wasn't pointed at the woods or a game trail or a water source. It was pointed down and across the parking spaces, straight at the rear ends of the vehicles. At the license plates. I'm in my late 40s. That day it was me and my son, who's grown now in his 20s, and knows a lot more about this kind of gear than I do. We'd driven out to a small national forest trailhead, the kind with a gravel lot, a wooden information board, a Forest Service access road, and not much else. No staffed office, weak cell service, maybe 8 parking spots, dense trees crowding right up above the lot, 4 or 5 other vehicles when we pulled in. Quiet. I run trail cameras on our own property for wildlife, so I know roughly how they're supposed to sit. You mount them at animal height, aim them along a trail or toward a clearing where things move through. This one was mounted low, maybe chest height. Lens tilted down over the parked cars. I pointed it out to my son. His first take was reasonable. Could be a Forest Service camera or a researcher's survey, and we shouldn't touch it. Fair enough. But he stepped closer, careful not to get in front of the lens, and studied the housing. He noticed the little stub antenna on top and told me it was a cellular-capable model. If it found enough signal, it could transmit low-resolution previews without anyone retrieving the card. We didn't know whether it had service in that exact spot, but the possibility meant removing the card might not remove images already sent. It could just as easily be storing everything locally, or someone might come by and pull the card by hand. Either way, the pictures weren't necessarily sitting in one place you could get to. The more we looked, the less it fit anything innocent. No game trail below it, no water, no animal corridor, just our cars and the gravel. Its field of view took in the whole row. Plates, gear, coming out of trunks. And when a hatch or a door stood open, the inside of the vehicle too, you could see what people were carrying, whether there was anything worth carrying. It would catch exactly who got out of which car and walked into the woods. We didn't touch it. We photographed it from several angles and looked for any sticker, serial, or engraved permit number on the housing. Nothing. So we walked to the information board to check for a permit notice or a research announcement, the kind agencies post so their equipment isn't mistaken for junk or vandalism. There was no notice at all. Then we clocked the rest. Fresh tire tracks near the top of the access road, off to the side. On a second tree nearby, another mounting strap with no camera. Around the first camera, the bark was scuffed and rubbed raw in a few places where a strap had clearly been cinched and re-cinched more than once. Somebody was tending this setup and moving it around. We started up the trail, but it was working on me. A couple 100 yards in, where the path forks, my son spotted a second camera, higher up, angled down at the split. That one wasn't on the plates. It covered both branches of the fork, logging which way each party went, how many were in the group, and the time they walked in. My son put the two together out loud. Camera 1 at the lot reads your plate and watches you unload. Camera 2 at the fork records which route you took and how many of you there were. Line them up and you have a timeline. This vehicle, these people, this trail, gone at this hour, and whether anyone stayed behind with the car. I actually stopped and asked my son whether we should just turn around and drive out. What settled it was a group of 6 or 7 day hikers coming up behind us, headed the same way. We fell in near them and stayed within sight of them. One of them, an older guy near the back, mentioned he'd seen a camera like that near a different pull-off a few miles back, and thought it was strange there, too. Fine, uneventful hike, but I kept the return in mind the whole time. Coming back down, there was a vehicle by the first camera tree that hadn't been there before. Older utility style, no markings, no logo, no light bar. A man was up at the tree with the housing open, doing something at it, batteries or a card. When he heard us on the gravel, he snapped the housing shut, fast, and turned around. Wildlife research, he said, population survey, all authorized, and we shouldn't be photographing the equipment. When my son raised his phone, the man actually sidestepped to put himself between the lens and the camera and said visitors weren't allowed to photograph research equipment. I kept it calm and just asked how to verify it. Which agency? Forest Service contracts it out. So he was the contractor? Will I volunteer with the project? Contractor or volunteer? He said he was kind of a research assistant. A third answer in a minute. What species? General wildlife. I asked for a project number, the contracting company, a supervisor, any official contact I could call. He had none of it. No badge, no permit tag, no name he'd give. We didn't push it. No sense making a scene in an emptying lot with weak signal. We stayed together, kept our distance, and didn't corner him against the tree. My son had already gotten photos of the utility vehicle before the man moved to block him, and we quietly noted the color and a couple of marks. We left while the larger group was still loading up. We drove out to a busy gas station and I called the ranger district, gave them the trailhead match to the coordinates on my map, described the 2 cameras, the angles, the unmarked vehicle, and the man who couldn't name an agency or a species. They asked whether we'd touched anything and I said no, and they told us not to go back or confront him. No approved study was registered at that trailhead, they said. And authorized gear normally carries identification. A ranger contacted us later and said the preliminary review confirmed what we'd suspected. Most of the images were of parked vehicles, license plates, open trunks, and hikers leaving the lot. Very few showed wildlife. They couldn't share more because the equipment had been turned over for further review. And he was careful to say they couldn't confirm a motive or say who all was involved. He did tell me the camera had been repositioned several times, each time aimed a little farther away from the woods and a little more directly at the parking spaces. That was where it ended for us. What it had been building toward nobody ever told us, and I'm not sure anybody knew. That's a different kind of patience. No one had to sit in a lot for hours because the watching had been left behind to run on its own, sorting hikers into plates and departure times. Every account so far has turned on the same quiet fact. The systems and courtesies built to keep hikers safe can be turned around and used to sort them instead. This last one is the clearest example. The threat wasn't hiding in the woods or the lot at all. It was written down in a woman's own handwriting, in the one place we're all told to leave our information. Story 5. He knew which trail I took. He said my first name before I'd spoken a single word to him, and then he asked how the upper loop had treated me, and I had not told one living soul which trail I was hiking that day. I'd only written it down in the register at the trailhead, where anyone at all could lift the lid and read it. I hike alone by choice, and I'm careful about it. I text someone my plan. I carry what I need. I know my limits. And part of being careful, I'd always believed, was signing the trail register, that box at the trailhead where you put your name, your start time, and your route. The whole point is safety. If you don't come back, searchers know where to look. I'd signed hundreds without a second thought. That's what makes this hard to tell, because the thing I did to be safe was the thing he used. It was a small forest trailhead, a modest lot off a 2-lane road, the sort of place that gets a handful of cars on a weekday. I got there mid-morning, 2 other vehicles. I filled out the register at the wooden box by the kiosk, and when I flipped to the current page, I saw the whole column of people ahead of me, right there in the open. Full names, routes, estimated return times, party sizes. A couple of lines above mine, a single woman's name, a loop route, and solo. Plain as day, I wrote my own entry, the way I always had. Name, first and last. Time in, route, upper loop, back approximately 2. Party size, 1. It had never once occurred to me that writing 1 was also announcing to any stranger who lifted that lid that I was alone. The hike was lovely and ordinary. Maybe 6 miles, some climbing, a couple of overlooks. I passed one pair early, going the other way, and after that, nobody. I lingered at the overlook, ate something, turned around, and came off the trail a little after 2, right on my estimate. The lot had emptied. The 2 vehicles from the morning were gone. There was one now that hadn't been there when I started, and it was parked directly beside mine, tucked in tight against my driver's side, so that reaching my own door meant squeezing into the narrow gap between the 2 vehicles. In a lot with a dozen open spaces, a man leaned against it, arms folded, facing the trail, in the posture of someone waiting for it to hand him somebody. I took that in within a few steps and kept an even pace and an even face. I angled a little wide toward the far side of my own car rather than straight at him, keys already in my hand, pack still on, both hands free. He smiled and said, "Hey, you're back right on time." Right on time. Then he used my name, my first name, easy and familiar. And he asked whether I'd turned around at the overlook or gone all the way around the upper loop. I'll be honest about what that does to you, because it isn't dramatic. It's quieter and worse. A name pulls at something automatic. My mind lunged to place him, an old coworker, someone from the gym, a neighbor's husband. And for a second I was embarrassed I couldn't. That reflex, the scramble to be polite and account for a face, is exactly the opening. And right on time sat wrong the instant after. Because how would a stranger know when I was due back? He knew my name. He knew my route by name, the upper loop. He knew my 2 o'clock. And when he added easy, that he figured I'd had the loop to myself out there today, I understood he'd read the party size column too. He couldn't know any of it. I hadn't told him. The only place all of it existed was that box 30 feet away. He lifted the lid, read my whole line, and maybe more than mine. I remembered that column of other names, the other solo entries. I wasn't the only option on that page. I was just the one whose return time matched the moment he was standing there. I didn't confirm anything, not my name, not the route, not the party size, not the schedule. I didn't apologize or ask if we'd met. I set myself where I could see both the trail entrance and the road, kept my car between us and said, clear and a little loud, loud enough to carry if anyone were near, "My friends are right behind me. They'll be down any second." I was alone, but it came out steady. Then, before he could answer, "Would you mind pulling forward a little? You're awfully close to my door." Which gave me a reason to be watching him instead of the other way around. His smile flattened, and I watched him recalculate. I did not unlock my door and get in, because that meant turning my back and dropping into the seat while he stood over the gap. So I stayed on my feet, kept the car between us, and took out my phone. I held it up and called my sister. Barely a bar, but it connected, and I said normal as anything. "Hey, are you and Mike almost to the lot? There's someone here." Mike is our word. There is no Mike. She heard it instantly. "Do you need me to call someone?" And I said, "Yeah, tell him to hurry." She stayed on the line and immediately texted my location and the Ranger District number to someone she trusted, asking them to make the call while she kept talking to me. As we spoke, I described the man and his vehicle aloud, the color, the make, so she'd have it, and so he'd hear me doing it. Right then, a car came down the 2-lane and slowed near the lot entrance, then rolled a few feet in, someone else entirely, just passing through, but another set of eyes. He looked toward it and his shoulders changed. He asked me one more thing, careful, testing. "So your friends, they parked down the road, or?" A question built to find out whether anyone was actually coming. I said only, "They'll be here," and added nothing. Between the friends he believed were approaching, my sister staying on the line, someone else being alerted, and the car slowing near the entrance, the situation had stopped being his to control. He pushed off his car, said, "No worries, thought you were someone else," which made no sense, given he'd used my actual name, got in, and drove off. I stayed on my feet, sister still on the line, and the second his vehicle turned onto the road, I said the direction he'd gone into the phone. I did not get in right away. I waited several minutes watching that road in case he'd pulled off around the first bend. Then I checked both directions, got in, locked the doors, and drove the opposite way from him, toward town, and pulled in at a busy gas station rather than heading home. Sitting there, in the lit lot, I wrote down everything while it was fresh. His face, the vehicle, the exact words he'd used before any of it softened. Then I called the Ranger District and told them what had happened, including that the register was an open box anyone could flip through. The woman was careful with her guidance. Fill in only what the official form actually requires. Don't volunteer anything more in a log anyone can read. And make sure someone you trust has the full version, the complete route, and return time. She mentioned they'd been talking about moving some of the exposed registers to a drop slot or privacy-protected design, so entries couldn't just be read by whoever walked up, but she was clear it was under discussion, not already done. That's the thing I keep landing on. Everything I'd done to be safe, I'd done correctly. And a man stood at that same box, read what I'd written, and turned a safety record into a timetable showing who was alone, where they went, and when they would return. He knew I was by myself. He knew the route. He knew my 2 o'clock, so he knew exactly how long he'd have that lot mostly to himself. And the page held more than my line. It was a whole list of people out in those woods, which way each of them had gone, and when each one would come walking back out of the trees to a nearly empty lot. I still hike alone. I still follow the instructions on official registers, but I no longer add anything the form doesn't ask for, and I make sure someone I trust has my full route, my vehicle description, and my expected return time. Because that box at the trailhead isn't only read by the people it's meant for. There's a reason all 5 of these happen at the edge of the woods and not deep inside them. A trailhead feels like the threshold to the dangerous part. So we treat the parking lot as the safe side of the line. We assume anyone standing there is a hiker like us, because why else would they be there? We assume a person sitting in a car is resting or waiting for a friend. We assume a vehicle makes a stranger legitimate, that a lanyard means authority, that a note on the windshield came from someone official, that a camera in a tree is watching the wildlife, that a friendly man who knows your name must actually know you. And the most exposed moment isn't the summit or the ridge or the river crossing, it's the walk back to the car. That's when the hard part is behind you and your attention loosens. When you're tired and thinking about food and the drive home,